All right. So hello and welcome. Thank you for attending today's program. My name is Matt Schumann. I am on the programming team here at Cary Library. Before we begin, please let me know if there are any technical issues, which I can try to resolve. You can send those to me in the chat. If you have any questions, you can send those in the Q&A button. I also want to thank everyone who sent pictures of their problem gardens or those who sent questions. And this program is also made possible by the generous donors to the Cary Library Foundation. I'd like to now introduce Ashley Rooney. She is the past president of the Lexington Field and Garden Club and has authored numerous books. She is well known in our community and has been an abundant supplier of speakers for our spring and summer virtual gardening series. So please welcome Ashley Rooney.
Thank you, Matt. I am really excited about this program today. We decided to do it on different gardening challenges that face all of us. And with me is Karen Droisen, another member of the garden club, and she really knows her plants. When I'm mystified by a plant, I can go to her. She also gives away plants because she grows a lot of them. So she's going to be a great help, and we'll show a definite gardening challenge that she has faced at the end of the program. So let us begin with image 1. This is a definite gardening challenge. Large roots, poor soil, and it's right outside the porch. Nothing to look at there. But what if the owners covered this with good-looking dark mulch and installed some great urns with plants? We got a note from Henry about a Norway maple with a very similar problem. As he discovered, nothing grows underneath the Norway maple. The shade is so dense, the soil is so dry because they suck up all the water. And there is a rumor that they secrete some substance that prevents plants from growing. He says, sadly, my flower beds along this neighbor's fence line are empty. Every year I try to fill in these beds, and every year I watch in sadness as everything dies. I researched it a bit, and it's they recommend planting very shade-tolerant ground covers under the tree. Hostas, wild ginger, epimedium are just a few of the plants you could try. Another thing that you could try was planting shade-tolerant plants in pots, which would help give the plant more room to expand, more room for its roots. You're going to have to water whatever you do to do that. With this guy, think of those big, beautiful pots. She has one out there, but think if there were a bunch and it was all on a nice dark mulch, it could look quite pretty. And it'd be a much better view from that porch. Now here in image 2, the owner was left with a steep pile of rocks. But they added more rocks to it and began planting it with all these different plants. And look how pretty that is. And imagine it in the winter with the snow. That could be quite lovely. So they took something that was ugly and a mess and turned it into something pretty. And that's often what you can do with your yard. My next images are really what to do with a small yard. Breaking up open areas of a small space so it feels larger, boosting intimacy actually helps small backyards. Creating escape nooks for reading and resting is a good small backyard idea for dividing up space and creating specific zones. Here, a mid-height fence and lots of pretty plantings help to screen out the view beyond, so you're not as aware of the house beyond there. Gardens aren't just about planting, pruning, and weeding. They're magical places, and there should be reminders along the way, pretty vignettes and little escapes. Whether they're used or not, a decorative table, a pot, a chair invite contemplation. The invitation stands. Come sit a while and smell the flowers. Now in image 4, this backyard was streamlined. Reducing visual clutter is another small landscaping idea that helps to create a sense of calm and order. The easiest way to do that is just to maintain a rigorous devotion to either just a few plants or just one color. Here, lilies and boxwood line that very firmly outlined path, which is parallel with the stakes over here. Or you can go vertical in a small garden. Horizontal space is at a premium in many of the best small backyard ideas. Think of the Back Bay Garden Tour. If you haven't gone, go, and if they have it next spring, do go. You will see tiny gardens who are really using their vertical space. Making space challenge gardens look larger than they actually are by adding a trellis or an arbor, even a statue can really be helpful. These structures help draw the eye upward to the horizon, catching the illusion, creating the illusion of more space. In this image, number 6, give your landscape a lift by adding high points. In this case, a tall statue that stands like an exclamation point. The idea was to lift the eye up off the ground, and the statue creates a sense of elegance and adds an element of mystery in this very tiny garden. Some of us have ugly walls or fences, as you can see in the image 7 here. But you can do a thing like a espalier, which looks complicated, but they're quite simple and very good at dressing up a plain shed or a house wall. You just sort of simply wire the branches up to the fence or what you're going to put it on. In image 8, we have developed perspective. Long straight lines trick you into thinking a small yard or small garden landscape is bigger than it is. To take full advantage of this illusion, subtly slant the far end of the lines towards one another and create a focal point. Here we've created the illusion of a large expanse by tapering the space so it's narrower at the far end of this lawn. The result is space that appears 1.5 times its actual length. And in the same garden, we have borrowed the views, image 9. If your neighbors aren't into gardening like you are, take advantage of their nearby spaces, if they're nice, to create the feel of a vista in your small garden landscape. This backyard is packed with color and texture, but the open views and soaring trees next door make it feel much more expansive. People say, oh, it's a golf course over there. In image 10, you can do something different. Here is a house that many of us know on a very popular street here in Lexington. They had very little land around it. It was built into the cliffs. But the landscaper did something very interesting with that little bit of space. He used grasses and small things going up the space there. And in image 11, you see more grasses in what he did. You can try dwarf varieties for a small horizontal area, as well as column-like evergreens, which the bonus of them is that they boost wintertime interest too. And here in Massachusetts, we should think of wintertime interest. Don't just plant all deciduous. In image 12, we make islands, which are a great solution for a garden that lacks a focal point and an easy way to add color and texture to a large expanse of boring lawn. And boring lawns are also a desert for pollinators, so you might think about adding something out there. Island beds can create an illusion of space, or they can cause a vast expanse of lawn to shrink. Here, the designer planned a diamond-shaped bed which contains dahlias, foxglove, poquissima, and California poppies over on the right. In image 13, there is a rule of thumb that many garden designers follow for the landscape. 1/3 shrubs and flower beds, 2/3 lawn. As with all rules, feel free to break this one. Perhaps you want to mow as little as possible. Perhaps you want to help out the butterflies and the bees. In image 14, you can make your shrubs and flower beds 2/3 of your landscape. Notice there are 2 islands here. And the lawn is only 1/3. They also can give you space to plant a variety of plants to add color and texture to your lawn. And in 15, if you really love plants, don't have need of a lawn, and are limited by a small backyard, consider skipping the grass entirely. The grass grew poorly here for this gardener, so they decided to go with paving stones and heather. Now that's something you could perhaps think of doing under that Norway Maple too. Try it that way. And the next image is we plant closely together. The key to making your garden look lush is to fill your garden beds. While this looks beautiful, it can also help you cut down on maintenance. My beds are so densely planted that they help control the weeds. Planting a lot in one garden could end up reducing time spent weeding, but just be careful not to go overboard. Too much in one bed, and it will be hard for any plants to establish themselves. Now I'm giving you an image 17. This is the spring view of this garden. That's what that garden looks like in the spring. So you see, the plants all have plenty of space. They just grow up and they're quite big. When you do this, make sure your plants have enough space to reach their full size without overlapping one another. I will admit, I divide my hostas frequently and give them away because they do keep growing. Image 18, add variety to your garden through the use of pots and potted plants. If you look down here and up there in the middle, you will see pots where she's brought other plants out and they can take them back in, just to add variety. And here's another one in image 19. And that's a beautiful pot that she has on this rock wall. Adds color to that whole background of green, quite lovely. And for my last image, 20, is go with the flow. If there's a drainage problem in your yard, and there are drainage problems here in Lexington, you might install a dry creek bed. But another possible route is to simply use plants that prefer to live in wet areas. Many native and naturalized plants have evolved to grow in wet soil, so they are effective landscaping solutions for areas with drainage issues. They'll grow where many other plants won't, and they'll absorb water runoff. So how about a lovely pussy willow, or red twig dogwood, which you see in here, matter of fact, or cardinal flower, which is also in here, or blue lobelia, or Joe pineweed, or daylilies. All those take water. And in the winter, this is about 2 to 3 inches deep of water. And look at it now, full bloom all the time. Now, Karen and I received a long message, well, not a message, a lot of pictures from Anita. And we're going to show you now and give some suggestions to Anita, and hopefully you all can learn from them, or they'll be helpful to you. This is Anita's front door, I would assume. My husband took a look at this and immediately said she'd take off this green gutter thing and do all white so it would blend in and not stick out. And Karen and I decided that she could put in narrow plants that only grow, they're not very deep, along this strip to cover the cement. You have more to add to that, Karen?
Well, I couldn't tell, or we couldn't tell from the photograph how much sun this gets during the day.
Right.
All of those, that flagstone, or I guess it's a brick path, on sunny days, it's going to generate a ton of heat for the plants in that little strip. So if it is a spot that gets a lot of sun, I'd recommend considering some xeric plants, Xeric, and those are plants that tolerate hot, dry areas. The thing you'd want to do is put in plants that need a lot of watering because that's all you'll be doing. So doing some research on plants that can tolerate heat and dryness and poor soil especially, so you don't have to amend it, would be a good idea if you're looking at a very hot area. The option that Ashley and I discussed was growing an easy vine by putting in a little trellis area or some wires along the side of the stairs. So if you wanted to plant something easy that tolerates poor conditions, morning glories would be fine and they grow quickly. You could sort of disguise the blank wall with a beautiful wall of leaves and flowers, and you could have it grow right up the banister on that pretty iron banister that's right there.
Okay, let's move on. And Anita, just so you know, it's very funny. Here we looked at this and we thought, again, you could have plants that could go over the cement wall, climb over. And Karen suggested that the water probably flows down in here and that you want to watch that area too. You might have some plants around here because I think that's probably why the cement cracked here. More
Yeah,
than
plants that don't mind wet feet.
yeah. But there's some lovely plants that you could do on that one. Let's go on to the next one then. This we thought was fine. Karen had a suggestion on the back edge there. You remember?
Yeah, it's just not defined especially well. So I think just using an edging tool to make a sharper edge would be fine. I think also trying to add some height good, maybe alongside the azalea or rhododendron. I can't tell what it is. But some more height I think would be good. You could add it between the daylilies as well.
Yeah, it would look nice. And you could add some kind of low perennial ground cover in these spaces between the daylilies.
Absolutely, to decrease the amount of weeding that you have to do. And it would look very pretty cascading over the something like creeping thyme, I think would be very easy to do.
Yep, I think exactly. And the next one, Matt? Oh, this was a little hard to figure out, but it looks like you have a lot of bushes here, and it's not nothing's growing in this area, the brown area. But it was hard for us to come up with a suggestion without actually seeing that or trimming. I would trim back the trees if you wanted to, or just let the trees overcome and have a garden there, have nothing there. Any suggestion, Karen?
I think that, I mean, it's sort of hard to tell if it's a high traffic area. If it is, there are plenty of ground covers that don't mind being stepped on all the time. Or putting in something like vinca vines would basically eliminate the amount of maintenance that you'd have to do. It looks like you could also fit in a shrub that didn't mind some shade, sort of back in the corner to kind of brighten up that darkness.
That'd be nice. And the next one, Matt? Oh, this is the one where I just jumped. Again, I would paint this white to make this merge a little bit because it immediately shows the gutter. Or you could hide this whole thing by bringing out your landscaping in sort of a circular thing, putting a tree, and I could really see a nice dogwood right in that kind of corner, but out, not closed up next to the house. It would block the AC. It would block that concrete inset of the basement there, and it would be much prettier. And if you bring it out in a curve, then you can bring your landscaping over and around, over to the front door or back door. This might be a back door since it looks like a yard. You're very sunny there. The question is whether you want bushes or do you want flowers? If you're this sunny and you have enough wet, why not blueberry bushes? They are beautiful in the fall. You get berries and you have little kids who will love eating them. I think that could be really fun. Karen?
The stoop itself is kind of plain. It's hard for me to tell how big it is, but if there were room for a nice big, rather narrow pot rather than a big one, big wide one, that might be something to put to the left of the front door, give it some color. If it opens into the kitchen, you could even have a little herb garden in that pot, so you can simply open up the door and get some herbs for dinner.
That's a good idea. That's very nice. And next one, Matt. And this is your garden, I think. And you obviously have a green thumb. You plant very nicely, and you have some very, Karen pointed out, the rose campion is so happy there, it's growing into your lawn. So you need to be careful or start giving away to your neighbors little pots of rose campion because you've got a lot of it there. But you could add more things in here. I was worrying about these vines that were going up. That looks like bittersweet to me, which you really don't want in there. You need to pull out. It's terribly invasive.
Yeah, it looks like it might be a good spot for a clematis. Ashley, I was thinking about the very good tip that you gave earlier about bringing height into your garden beds. So if you can get rid of that bittersweet, that might be a good spot for a clematis. It should, I mean, it could eventually spread over quite a few fence panels.
Yeah, which can be very nice, kind of a espalier.
Absolutely.
It could be great. And it would also block some of the white plastic peeling of that fence.
Yeah.
You could also go for some taller plants there because you have a fence to support them so they wouldn't be knocked down. I mean, I don't do snapdragons because I would get too much in. But your snapdragons could stand up straight there, or your sunflowers, or gladiolas if you like them.
Anita responded in the chat saying that she wanted to transplant some of these plants to the door area.
Okay. We should.
There's a low-growing juniper or cypress bush to the left of the rose campion. And that might work.
Yeah, the front door area, it's hard because these will, you know, the rose campion's going to bloom for just so long. You have to deadhead it to make it keep blooming. So then there's your front door looking like in about 2 months. So what would you like to do then? That's why I wouldn't do something like the rose campion there. The rose geranium, the same thing will happen. An evergreen would be a better way of doing it.
And I think since the front door area...
Which one is bittersweet? Oh, excuse me.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm getting a question from her too. This one, I think, it looks like bittersweet. The vine that's crawling up the fence. There are 2 vines there. I don't have a pointer because Matt's running it. Matt, can you do a pointer? No. Okay. Oh, there you go. Yeah, that vine. And this one over here. That looks like bittersweet. And I'm not too sure what this thing is over here. It might be a rose, though. If it is bittersweet, pull it out, put it in your garbage, you know, let it go into the garbage. Don't compost it. It really spreads, and it's terrible to get out of the place. People complain about lily of the valley. I think bittersweet is much worse. Now, Karen was going to say something.
Oh, no, I think you covered it. I mean, I guess I pictured the door area that we just saw as just to make, you know, to put in shrubs in that area rather than a flower bed, because with kids, I imagine there's just so much foot traffic going on that you want something that's easy and substantial that you don't have to worry about kind of around your front door.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, next one. The speaker's voice gets distorted at the end of sentences.
Yeah, Karen, if you're able to turn down your mic just a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there we go. I don't think we had many suggestions here, except maybe with the strengths over here, Karen.
Audio settings. Sorry, just talking.
Oh, all right.
Okay. When we were wondering a bit about this fence that we show here. It's a kid's playground. You want to keep it as simple as possible. So, because the kids are running around and playing there. You could, again, have a clematis or a vine going up that fence. Take away just the brown cedar palings of it. It would make it look a little prettier. Stuff like that. Karen?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's that sort of expansive fence that isn't really visually connected to anything else in that area. So just softening it with some vines. It looks like there's not that much ground to work with. There's not that much dirt. And vines don't need that much. So that would be a good spot, I agree, for some vines and maybe some, like a juniper to kind of tumble down the slope a little bit, hold on to the topsoil. But I agree with Ashley that since it's going to be kid central, a flower bed is not the best idea at this point. You can soften up that fence.
Yeah, that could be pretty tricky. And the next one, please, Matt. And this is more or less, it's slightly different view. I was worried about this tree, which looks like it is getting old. You see the branches, there are some dead branches up there, and you're going to lose that one of these days. So you need to think about what you want to do if you're going to lose that. Do you want the shade of whatever tree, what that offers you, or you don't care? maybe it'd be better not to have the tree there at all.
Yeah, I think the tree, because it stops, like when you're looking at it visually, it simply stops you in the middle of the yard. It makes the yard look smaller.
Oh, good point. Yeah. So you could go without the tree. I wouldn't take it down yet, but I would just keep an eye on it so you don't want to lose it in the middle of one of these storms that we've been having.
Yeah.
You know, that happened to my neighbor and they lost the whole garage. It's terrible. But it does look like it's coming to an end. Okay, and next one, Matt. And this is that fence again. And here you have this full evergreen border, raised border. Somebody put work in here with this raised border edged by brick. Karen, you had more to say on this than I did.
Oh, I mean, they all just need pruning and shaping. I mean, it'll do it an amazing amount of good just to get them better shaped, because it is a nice balance of different greens. And I see, now I can see that the empty part of it has a little slope to it. So you'd need something that would hold on to some of that soil. Otherwise, it's just going to keep washing down from that area. But, you know, I mean, some nice shrubs just to continue the line of shrubs, I think, would make it look bigger, because visually you're not stopped, like shrub, 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 and then wall. You might go shrubs all the way up alongside the wall. Maybe break up the, break it up with some climbers.
Yeah, well, you're making a perspective there. You're getting a nice long line, and so
exactly.
Of it.
Exactly.
Makes you feel like this is great. Also, the shrubs help kind of protect you from the neighbor's house. You may be best friends, but you don't always want to be on top of each other and hear all the noises from their family at times. Okay, and the next one, Matt? Yeah, you definitely have a green thumb. One of the things I thought is that you needed to probably add some fertilizer or mulch to these beds. My Shasta daisy, and here you have them there, is growing in a great big clump, and yours are like single little stalks. So it should be doing better than that. Your lilies are doing fine, but lilies are pretty hardy babies. You might want to fertilize all this, make them happier.
And add some composted manure. Each year I add about 1 inch of it to the top of all my beds, and it gives you a nice sort of polished look to it because it's very dark, but it also feeds the soil. And soil does kind of wash away, topsoil washes away all year long. So just enriching it with the composted manure each spring, I think, is a good idea.
Yeah, it's over in the area next to the house. In this part of the garden, up here, up in the front, there are your Shasta daisies. They're in a big fat clump along with your lady's mantle and so forth, and it looks fine. It's over there that I'm thinking, oh, something's wrong there. So maybe I would add more plants. Obviously, the lilies seem to do well. See what else you can get. You could divide this big yellow lily, and it's easy to divide them. You just put your shovel in, put your foot on a shovel, cut it in half, or fours. Keep planting the different parts of it. You have all these different plants, and you have the room for it there. And
it would unify the look of the bed if you can repeat the same plant in a few different places. It gives it a kind of cohesion.
Oh, she wants to know what fertilizer.
Oh, one of my favorite topics. So my philosophy on fertilizing is that you don't want to use anything chemical that has a massive amount of chemical substances within it, nitrogen, potassium, and the other one that I can't remember. So it's called an NPK ratio. And many of the more chemical fertilizers will have a huge ratio, like 30, 30, 30. And I don't think that any soil needs that kind of shock to it. So for fertilizer, first of all, if you put the composted manure on top, that will feed it all year long. But I dig in a slow release granule fertilizer that's gentle and organic, and that will feed it all summer long. And usually once or twice a summer, I give mine a dose of fish emulsion, liquid fertilizer, which is easy to just apply with a watering can. So, I mean, I think keep it simple, and you know, you'll save yourself a lot of money by not using the chemical fertilizers that have big marketing campaigns behind them to make you think you need them, but you really don't. I mean, you know, mine does just fine with the feeding in the spring. And you don't want to feed in the fall because you want your plants to kind of gently go into dormancy. So hitting them with a dose of food, you know, as they're starting that process really isn't necessary, and it kind of disturbs what, you know, what they want to do.
No, but one thing I was thinking, you know, I'm assuming you're from Lexington at the moment, and at the moment, Hartwell composting has no compost because so many people garden this year. But once it'll have composting in probably by the fall, I'm sure. And that's where I often get how I feed my garden is from that compost, from either my own compost bin or from them. And what if there's mulch in the bed? Do you put the manure compost over the mulch? So mulch in the bed.
I would just rake them. I don't mulch anyway, but I would just rake mulch off, then apply the composted manure and kind of scratch around in the soil. So you're mixing the composted manure with the soil that's already there. And then you'll see the composted manure has it's a beautiful dark background for your plants. But you definitely want it in there. And so I'd rake away existing mulch and then just rake it back on.
Yep. Then maybe, given that you have so many plants, I would get a composter if you don't have one already, because you've got a lot of things going here, and it could be, it's good. It's a good way of getting rid of stuff and taking care of things. What if we took care of the mulch question. I don't mulch either because I plant heavily and I underplant, so there are plants underneath my plants, so it's another way of doing things.
Just one last note. The beds just need to be edged with a sharp edger just to define the edge of the bed, because right now it kind of blends into the lawn. So just a simple curving edge kind of around the front of the bed, I think would make it sort of an instant fix to make it look more polished.
Yeah, curves are nice as opposed to straight lines. They're
absolutely.
And you might even think of having a bush or something which would help conceal the gutter at the very end. You could have a bush that sort of stands out there. Nice flower bush would be great. Okay, we should continue on. Next one, Matt. This is the same kind of look. Yeah, right there at that gutter is where I put that bush. Here is a plain brown pad. I couldn't quite figure out where this was. But again, I would take a vine or something, and you have dirt here, and try to grow something over this. You make it look a little prettier. It's a nice sort of driftwood feeling to that fence, but it's a big plain board feeling. And if you had an espalier, or like I showed earlier, or a clematis, or it may have to be a shade vine given that there are pines up above. But I would look into that. Otherwise, you might look for some pots that could help it. Make it look.
Yeah, I think the pots are a great idea. And I've also seen planters that you kind of hang on the top of a wall or deck railing. So you could just pop some up there, and that'll bring the eye upwards, and you can plant some tumbling stuff just to break up that wall. So Ashley, I think that's a great point.
Yeah. Okay, and next one, Matt? Was that it?
I think that was it.
Okay. Oh no, I want to be sure Anita, since she's in the audience, is happy. Are there any questions before we go to Karen's part? I don't see any questions. So Anita, you are okay with all that? Yes, so. Okay, now the last part, now you really get to see Karen in her forte. She loves to garden, as you will see what she has been doing. This is an enormous project, which also answers somebody's, I forgot her name, James, Students' question. Okay. Take it away, Karen.
Thank you. So I have an enormous, it's about 70 feet long, a ditch in the back of my yard. And it's eroding on both sides, naturally, because it's a slope. All of the topsoil is gradually. So the image on the screen is kind of a long view. And you can also see just the sheer length of it, but also the irregularity of it. So in the distance, it's kind of a gentle slope. It's easy to kind of climb up it, but in the near distance, it's practically straight up. So you have to think kind of creatively about the different needs of those two areas. The next slide, please. Okay, so this view shows both sides of the ditch, and you can see just how different they are and how different the needs are. So on the, I don't need to go into which bank is which, but anyway, this gives you a sense of the two sides of the ditch that come together, as well as how different the height and the slope is on each one. Next slide, please. So this is a very rough overview of the space. And I guess what I wanted to show is the different stages that it's at. The highest, steepest part, which is section C, is untouched. Section B is mature plantings that I've put in over the last 4 or 5 years. And section A is what I'm working on now. So I think with the very rough measurements, you can get an idea of what I'm sort of up against in this. Slide, please. And so this is the opposite side of the bank, which is actually much easier to cope with. It's not as high or as. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the sort of current project. I'm sort of working my way north to plant the whole bank. The previous tenant put in a Virginia creeper that I have mixed feelings about because it's so aggressive. It does spread and it is so easy to grow it. So to hold on to that topsoil that you can see it's eroding, there's the Virginia creeper from the previous owner, and the bare spots are where I've pulled out what felt like acres of garlic mustard and bindweed. So now that it's clear, I can start planting it. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is the same area, but only 3 weeks later. So you can see how much is filled in already. It gets plenty of sun. There's still some bare patches. But I just wanted to give a sense of how quickly you can fix this ugly problem area. All you have to do is pick ground covers that spread quickly and will grab onto your topsoil. Next slide, please. So these are some of the plants that I put in the bare spots. The little one in the center is euphorbia. And I took some from another part of my garden, several clumps, and put them in the biodegradable pots just to give it a little more of a reinforcement because that part is rather steep. So I put the pots in the ground. So it's kind of an experiment. You can also see in the near foreground, you can see the Virginia creeper. Behind the euphorbia, you can see a vinca vine kind of creeping in. So there, I usually have 4 or 5 plants mixed in so it doesn't get boring to look at. Next slide, please. So these are mature plantings, and this will give you a sense of the effect that I'm going for. It's a mix of, in the foreground, Joe Pye weed, which is a native and a pollinator magnet. But I've also got creeping thyme that grew from seed, and a little further in the background, you can just see some yellow irises. So this is pretty much what I'm going for, and I'm always adding to this section. But you can see the kind of density of plants. Next slide, please.
That's very pretty.
Yeah, I'm happy with the way it's turning out, especially the way the Joe Pye weed is spreading, because it's so good for pollinators. So this is kind of a close-up of the mature planting section. You can see there's a hosta at the front left of the frame. And the stuff in the center crawling through the daylilies is lamium, yellow lamium, which is incredibly vigorous and easy and tolerates drought. And that's why I chose it to intermingle. And I like the informality of the kind of daylilies doing their thing, and then the lamium kind of grows in and around it. And since this is at the bottom of the incline, I put in that hosta because the soil is quite rich, because the topsoil is flowing down, and it also gets more shade. So I put some thought into what can go at the bottom of the slope versus what needs to go at the top. Okay, perfect. All right, so this is just a close-up of another section where you can see the daylilies really taking over in their fight for world domination. That I took from other areas of my garden. So, you know, there's no financial cost to it, just a lot of scrape up knees, but they're doing their thing. The only thing I worry about is they're spreading both down and up. So they're starting to make inroads on the garden bed that's sort of at the top of that slope. So I'm having to keep an eye on them.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. So this is another area of mature plantings, and you can see that horizontal band is Coreopsis. Again, grows very quickly and forms an incredibly dense mat of roots. So it's really ideal for the top of that slope. It's going to hold on to the topsoil, and it needs virtually no care. And then, of course, the yellow flag irises, which are considered an invasive plant, which is fine with me because they're spreading happily and it's the back of the slope. And you can just see sort of towards the right where the white flowers are. That's a cotoneaster, a low growing one that again is holding on to topsoil. And then in the foreground are patches of creeping thyme that I just sprinkled seeds and it's doing its thing. So again, you can see I've tried to choose a variety of foliage and shapes and types of plants. So I have a shrub, but I also have bulbs and flowers growing. They're perennials and bulbs. Next slide, please. So this is what I'm up against. This is the before picture. This is the scrub that's at the far south end. And it has a row of arborvitaes that my neighbor planted that are helping somewhat with the erosion. But you can see it's really a challenge. I mean, it gets up to like 15 feet, very steep slope because there's been so much erosion. So this is what the whole ditch looked like before I started. So that's the before picture. Next slide, please. And this is the after picture. So it's gone from the untouched scrub to this area of mature planting, where you can see different types of plants and shapes and like that. And so far, the plantings are doing a really good job of holding on to the topsoil and stopping the erosion. So I'm really pleased with the way it's worked out. Again, I picked easy growing things that like to spread and tried to put in a variety of them just to keep it visually more interesting. And that's my problem area.
And that's a good problem area for anybody. And that's really amazing. When she first showed me these pictures, I was like, wow. I mean, and to look at the difference between the two. And at the end where you see the different colors and textures, it's really quite beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really something. I know that was hard work. We did get from Anita, she wrote back, along that fence are a lily of the valleys. I don't know if we can go back to which slide with lily of the valleys. One thing, lily of the valleys, most people want them out of their lawn because they're very invasive. So if you have a chance to dig them out and they're not too big, I get rid of them now and find something that's easier and not as invasive. Or if you really love lily valleys, figure out a way that you can keep them from spreading into your lawn and your other flower beds and so forth, because they will take over.
I think I remember the slide that showed them. They were sort of on the far right on a strip, and they were sort of on the far right of the strip. And then there was bare ground. I think whatever you plant there, you want it to be the same plant or, similar plants, so that, visually the eye just moves continuously without having to stop over and over.
Anita replies, I want them out.
Yay.
You need to take a spade and you need to fight them. You can dig them out, but the little roots will come back, but you will win the fight. I've won the fight. A lot of people have won that fight. It's not insurmountable. It definitely can be done.
There are people that really like them. So what I've done in the past is just put a posting on Craigslist saying, free, if you want to dig them out, have as much as you like.
Oh, that's a good way of doing it. Matter of fact, I had a landlord who used to pick them early in the morning and sell them on the streets to Boston. I want them out best time of year, take them out now.
Yeah.
Pick a day where it's just raining so the soil is easier to work with and get them out. The one nice thing about gardening like this, gardening like what Karen has done and showed you there, is that you don't have to go to the gym. You're going to develop your muscles and exercise right here, and it's going to be good. There will be no punch on your body. You will have muscles that you'll be pleased with. So it'll be really nice. And do we have any questions before we sign off here? I didn't check my Q&A. No open questions there. I checked my chat.
We did have the question that was emailed about plants for a shady slope.
Yes. Well, which you just showed a lot, right? And we talked about the Norway Maple. Oh. You have your list.
Yeah, so I have, most of mine is sunny. So I do have a list of suggestions for a shady spot, but I'm happy to give a few ideas, or we can put them in the newsletter, whatever you think is best.
Why don't you just rattle off your list of the...
Sure. Okay, so again, this gardener is dealing with a slope. So you want to control erosion, and it's in a shady spot. So a nice choice, I think, if it's not a high traffic area, in other words, you're just going to be looking at it, is bearberry. Bear like a hungry bear. Bearberry. There are also dwarf junipers and cypresses that kind of cascade down. There's mini mondo grass. Loriope, I think, would be a good choice. It spreads easily. There's kind of a creeping purple euonymus. You can also look at dwarf nandia, which is a type of bamboo that's not especially aggressive. And lamium. I have some yellow lamium planted, the kind of silvery green leaves. The pink lamium actually does better in shade. So that would be my suggestion. The only variable is there a lot of traffic, or is it just something you're going to look at? If there's a lot of traffic, you need something very tough, obviously.
Right. Matter of fact, in my research, the lamium was recommended for the Norway Maple too.
Oh, yeah.
And you had a long list that you were sharing with Matt on the slide.
No, we ended up, I thought we decided to put it into the newsletter, but I'm happy to talk about it now.
That was also for the people, because not everybody who's listening to this is in the garden club. Okay.
Oh, okay. So I just have suggestions for what to plant under pine trees, oak trees, on narrow strips of ground, high traffic areas, and alternative lawns. Do you want me to go through them quickly, or it's up to you?
Yeah.
You also have another question in the Q&A. I think that's the same person who was raising their hand, but I think that they just ended up typing.
Can you plant lily of the valley under the trees in a wooded area? Depends what kind of trees.
Definitely want a tree that whose roots are not right on the surface, because that makes digging just impossible.
Yeah, and you want, I would think, a tree that was deciduous, because lily of the valley blooms in the spring. And so you want the sun to be able to hit that, and then it could be all right to be in the shade later on. So you can do that. Yeah. Yes. Can you read your notes, or I have them too, if you want me to take
Sure.
them to you.
I'm happy to go through them. I mean, the first one is about what to plant under trees, so it's kind of an easy transition.
Okay.
I just wanted to backtrack on the actual digging. I would dig out a long trench, and then, I mean, it doesn't have to be deep for lily of the valley, but just sort of dig out a long strip, line up the bulbs on it, and then cover it with soil, rather than planting each one individually.
Yes, no, I agree with that. Okay, plants under pine trees.
Yeah, and so this is something that, I mean, I know so many people that are trying to deal with it. The first thing to do is to give the area a little more sunshine. So you cut off the lower branches, which are the ugliest anyway. And some suggestions that I'd have are ajuga, and there are many different colors to choose from, Ajuga. Hostas will work because pine tree roots are fairly deep. Sweet woodruff, which is sort of a cute little ground cover, and azarum, which is wild ginger. So those are for under pine trees. Another common issue in New England is planting under oak trees. And this is, you have to put a lot of thought into oak trees because their roots are closer to the surface, and you never want to plant closer than 10 feet from the trunk, because that area needs to breathe. You don't have as much of an issue with a pine tree planting closer to the trunk, but you need at least 10 feet from the trunk of an oak tree. You want plants that will not compete for nutrients or water. So you want plants with a shallow root system. So Pucheras, I think there's some that'll work. They're small ones. Easiest way to go is California fescue, which is a grassland native. So it looks terrific in sort of a big bed, and creeping sage, which is a California native. So again, the type of tree is going to determine what you should plant and how you should plant it.
Okay, and let's do another thing in here.
I mean, I have more that I could do, but we're out of time. Yeah.
You mentioned the xeric things, the dry plants.
Yeah, for dry or hot strips, consider xeric, Xeric, which are drought-tolerant plants. You can use the site wildflower.org to find plants that are native to this area, which is always what you want to do. So planting a bunch of desert plants, while it might look beautiful, it certainly will look beautiful, you're planting a bunch of non-natives, and you want a native plant that's going to be part of the ecosystem where we live. It's good for native pollinators, for example. So wildflower.org is a good way to find natives. So for a dry hot strip, as Ashley mentioned, a hardy geranium would be perfect. Same with lavender if you've got full sun. Penstemon is happy in hot, dry strips, and in fact, you don't want to water it a lot. Many grasses will do fine. And then there are a couple of more decorative plants, echinops, which is globe thistle, and artemisia.
Okay.
All plants that are happy in a hot, dry area with poor soil. They don't need a lot of food or water.
Good, good. And the rest of this will be in the newsletter. So if you have a friend who's in the garden club, you can get that. We will include that, Matt's going to include that. And I think oh my goodness, we're right at the end of the time. I thank you all for coming. This is on YouTube. You can see it again for somebody like Anita. There were a lot of things that were said there. I hope help you. Feel free to contact us through the library. Next week, we have a beekeeper. Find out about keeping bees. What's going to happen? I did it, and it's been absolutely amazing what happened to my garden. It's streaks of color now. It's gorgeous. And I think the bees really did their job, for sure. And the honey is fantastic. People are already writing and wanting to buy all my honey. So thank you all. And I'm glad you're here. And thank you for those of you who submitted your challenges. It was fun to do. And thank you, Karen, for being our guest celebrity.
My pleasure. I'm not much of a celebrity.